and we're going to look at the pilgrims in the New World. Remember that the pilgrims are being blown off course. They were going to go to Virginia, but they got blown off course, and they're going to Massachusetts. And they find out that the land is empty. Let's see what it says, the background. Okay, first of all, William Bradford became the leader of the colonists. Remember, on board the ship, they decided they were going to make some kind of a constitution or a compact, something to live by, so that they would know their purpose. And their purpose was to glorify God, giving allegiance to the king, even though the king didn't really, want them around because they didn't go to his church. They still were loyal to the king, because even Jesus in the Bible tells us that we have to be obedient to our leaders as long as it does not go against the laws of God. Okay, so they wanted to glorify God, and they wanted to preserve the colony and also to advance Christianity. They wanted to be able to worship the way they wanted to. And they knew that there were Native Americans there, and they were hoping that they would also be able to teach them about the Christian faith. And we're going to see who their leader was. It was, as I said, it was William Bradford, and he became the governor. And for 30 years. He was not the first governor. The governor is like their leader. Sort of like we have a president of the whole United States. We have 50 states, and every state has a governor who is the leader. And every town has a mayor or some kind of a commission where they have people who legislate or make sure that we keep the laws of the city and the state and also the country. In other words, we're kind of we don't really run ourselves. We can't. If we have to live together in harmony, meaning no fighting, so there's no wildness in the streets, we have to abide by laws and regulations. And the mayors and the governor and the president make sure that we follow our laws. And that's what they wanted to do here with the Mayflower Compact, to make sure that the people who were there were good citizens and good Christians. And William Bradford took over after the death of John Carver, and he was the governor of that Plymouth area for over 30 years. And he wrote a book called Of Plymouth Plantation. And in fact, we're going to read something on page 154. I think we read this page. Did we talk about the children and the being on the board the ship and the sickness? Well, we could read it.
Yeah, we did.
Okay. All right. Now remember, when they arrived at this land that they called Plymouth, it was uninhabited. There were no other people there except, of course, the Native Americans. And it's according to English common law, a man could occupy empty land and claim it for its own. But of course, they didn't realize that this wasn't really their land. They assumed that they could take it over because the Indians had not put any permanent houses on there. Remember, the Indians lived in tents or in these huts made out of deer skin or bear skin, covering the thatched structure. You know, they took the young trees and bent them together to make little huts. And then if they had to move on, they would just pick up and go. So the English decided, since there wasn't anybody there, that this land belonged to them, which is not right because the natives were there first. Okay. Now, although most of the people on the Mayflower survived the journey across the Atlantic Ocean, only half survived that first winter. Those who were healthy enough went ashore to help build the homes, and the crew, along with the women and children and the sick, were left on board for protection because, if you've ever been to Massachusetts in the wintertime, it is cold. It's very cold. In fact, I think they're expecting snow this weekend, or they had some snow flurries up in the east yesterday or today. Okay, so they built the houses while the weak and the women and children stayed inside. So let's turn to page 156, and let's find out what happened, because remember, they came and it was approaching winter. They had no time to plant. They had very little left on board the ship because, remember, their supplies are limited to what they could hold on the bottom of the ship. They had to eat, and the winter is long. Okay, now let's read. The winter was hard for the pilgrims. They had little food and many died. One day, a woodland man visited the settlement. His name was Samoset. The pilgrims were surprised when he spoke English. He promised to bring his chief and his friend Squanto to meet them. Soon, the pilgrims met the chief, and you look at the picture on page 157, and Squanto. Squanto spoke English too. He also knew the English ways. The pilgrims trusted the woodland people. They made a peace treaty. Now, I don't know if Powhatan and Captain John Smith in the Jamestown colony ever made a peace treaty, or if they did, wasn't it broken? The treaty was a promise to live in peace. The woodland people and the pilgrims lived in peace for many years. Okay, now, he had learned English. The two Indians had learned English because there had been fishermen, English fishermen, and also, if I remember correctly, there might have been a time when Squanto or Samoset had even worked or been guides for some of the settler. Well, they weren't really settlers; they were more adventurers. They didn't really plan to live in that area. They just came and went, and they learned. And these two Indians learned English ways. But anyway, we're going to stop here, and you're going to look at the differences between the two settlements. And I want you to think about it, how the English treated the Indians, the type of people who settled Jamestown and who settled Plymouth. There is a difference, and we will go over that tomorrow. And that will be a discussion for us. Okay? All right? Have a nice night. Adios, muchachos.